What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. This week we're getting the next 10 levels of the Void Erosion Purge activity, levels 21 through 30, supposedly the most difficult content yet we have to see in the game. So earlier in this week I released a build for Haley that has a super easy time going through the first 20 levels, and which I assume will be the same case for the next 10 since she is very chunky. Now, today's video is actually going to focus on Ines, and this is going to be a little bit different than the Haley one because I believe that Ines is the Descendant that is most likely the one that's going to be able to steamroll this content with the most ease, and that's practically because she seems to be tailor-made for this activity, and she has a couple of advantages in her kit that put her ahead of the other Descendants. Now, I already have a full build guide video for a mobbing setup for Ines and a bossing setup for Ines and everything like that on the channel that goes into deep, sort of like, let's say, deeper discussions on the abilities and everything, how they work. So I'm not going to focus too much on that, and this will definitely be a video that is tailor-made for Void Erosion Purge. So while some of this might carry over into general mobbing, might carry over into bossing, the idea is that this should set you up for basically just winning all the way through this activity and being able to put that shit on grind so that you can get as many weapon cores as possible and you can get all your weapons kitted out. If that sounds good, then buckle up and here we go. So I am not going to go through all of her abilities and her kit in great detail, but I do think that it is a good place for us to start from to essentially just sort of like explain some of the nuance here. So in terms of her setup and basically what you want to be doing from a mobbing perspective, and more specifically mobbing in Void Erosion Purge, is you definitely want to get your hands on Time of the Hunting Hounds, which is one of her 2 Transcendant mods. This Transcendant mod essentially makes a couple of key changes, but first and foremost what it does is it unifies all of your abilities to electric tech. So that is, of course, also then basically determines which reactor you should be farming for, and it absolutely should be an electric tech reactor. So as you can see, if this is off, then you can see some of her abilities are singular and some of her abilities are tech. So Time of the Hunting Hounds unifies all 4 of her abilities to tech, but more specifically, it unifies the bread and butter of this build to tech. So again, as I said, this was singular before, now her first ability becomes tech. So Floating Lightning is essentially a skill that is on a super low cooldown, or at the very least it will be, and this will be the main damage dealer for you, or at the very least the way that you transition from area to area dealing damage. Now, you will use this pretty much on cooldown the entire time, so there's no moment that you aren't absolutely spamming this. So for example, if you're playing on keyboard or mouse, it makes a lot of sense to bind this to something like mouse roll up or down, because otherwise you fucking are going to throw your fingers or your hand in the trash after a couple of runs because you're going to be dying. Then her second ability, Lightning Conductor, is essentially an AoE that you should think of it this way, that you should use her first ability, and then when her first ability has debuffed the enemies, then you can use the second ability to essentially, capitalize on that debuff. Now, this is something that you can fold into your rotation as you move around, but it's not essential, and you can absolutely get by just using her first ability. Her third ability is a really good ability, and Time of the Hunting Hounds actually changes it and turns it into this like sort of jump forward and leap, as you can see in the footage there. But for the sake of doing Void Erosion Purge, the early stages, you can absolutely do this. But when it comes to the later stages and where you have enemies that deal so much damage that they can in some cases one-tap you, it makes absolute no sense to stand still for that long in one place and then to essentially vault right into their faces so that they can just point blank fucking shoot you like a shotgun to the chest, basically. So while this is a really good ability and while it deals tons of damage, basically in lower stages of Void Erosion Purge, it can one-tap the boss at the end of the run, which you should absolutely do for shits and giggles. This is not something that we fold into our rotation during just a standard high-level Void Erosion Purge. And then comes her fourth ability, Snare Hunter. Now, Snare Hunter is essentially, you can think of it as a unidirectional turret that can shoot through walls. By the way, all of her fucking abilities can shoot through cover and walls, and that is one of the main reasons why she is so good at this activity. Some of the Void Erosion Purge stages are in open areas, and some of them are in like fucking basically labs and shit, and like areas that you have to go through. And essentially that means that a lot of the times you can use a geometry and you can use the stuff that's around you, cover, doors, fucking, you know, corners, everything like that, to provide you with a way to avoid getting shot, hit, or looked at, but you can actually access the enemies with damage by essentially shooting through the walls. Now, Snare Hunter, as I said, is a unidirectional turret that essentially creates this big kill box, and anything that's near in that kill box gets electrocuted and shot by this. And again, like I said, this goes through cover, this goes through walls, everything. So your positioning of this skill can a lot of times mean that you can essentially cover an entire area, and it's what makes it so good in those lab stages, because shooting one of these into a room full of enemies can usually kill all of those enemies, or the majority of them, leaving one or two of the tough ones for you to just mop up with your first ability. So that's basically it. That's the thing. Again, like I said, I'm not going to go into the nuance of her kit, like the fact that you have to stack crit and everything like that. If you want to a little bit of a deeper dive into that, please do go ahead and check out the other Ines video. I also feel like she's been out for a while now, and every creator worth their fucking salt has made a build on her. So I think this knowledge kind of has permeated itself through the community already. So I think we're good to go. So first things first, then, setting her up, we're going to drop in the mods, and I'm going to just quickly go over the explanation of why each one of them are there. Basically, I would say that 99% of the content creators out there that have built Ines have consensus on essentially 9 of the 10 mods that go in here. So the 10 that I'm talking about are these 10, of course, here. So I think it's kind of like understood that everybody uses the same 9, but there's a lot of discussion about the 10th mod and which one is better for Void Erosion Purge, which one gives you the most bang for your buck, and basically which one deals the most damage and gets you to be able to go fast through this activity. I'm going to show you each one of these versions and the advantage that they have, so that you can make an uniform, or let's say an educated decision on which one you should run. But when we're building her, your order of priority is crit, then cooldown, then range, and then survivability. This is a glass cannon build, and while it's not as glass cannon as you can possibly go, we are only putting in one survivability mod, which means that you need to be able to play well and to understand when you push into a room and when you don't, because making those kinds of decisions will oftentimes be the difference between you lying on your fucking ass or actually coming out on top. So again, like I said, in order of priority, crit up to as close to 100% as we can get. Then we want cooldown, because we want our 4th ability, Snare Hunter, available as fast as possible and as often as possible. And we want pretty much our first ability to never run out of stacks, since Time of the Hunting Hounds gives us 3 stacks of this. You always want there to be extra stacks so you can spam this. And then of course we want range, because range is an important stat for her, because it actually means how many times your first ability bounces. All right, more range means more bounces, and more bounces means more damage, and especially in groups, those bounces will bounce between all the enemies, so you will be dealing a shitload of AoE damage. And range also increases the radius of your Snare Hunter, means that instead of it being a small little circle, you can really blow this thing up, and it covers an entire fucking room and basically nukes everything inside it. And then last, like I said, survivability, we're going one survivability mod. So you guessed it. Which survivability mod are we talking about? Can we get it yelled out? It is increased HP. That is our only survivability mod, and that's the only one that we're putting in. This is going to be the base version of it, and then we're going to discuss changes you can make based on the difficulty that you might be having with this build. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, as I said, is crit. Now, she is a Descendant that starts with a high crit multiplier already. She starts with 15%. So that means that we don't necessarily have to stack as much into crit as we usually do with other Descendants. And essentially what this means is we can go for our 2 blue mods, which is skill, let me find it, skill insight, which is going to be over there. And then we're going to go with skill concentration. We're going to go with skill concentration. So that's skill critical hit rate, and it is skill critical hit damage. All right. Then the next thing we want is we want to add one of the purple mods. Now there are 2 purple mods for crit. There is Frontlines, and there is a mod called Emergency Measures. Okay, Emergency Measures gives us a huge amount of critical hit rate and a smaller amount of critical hit damage, whereas what is it called, Frontlines, gives us a big amount of critical hit damage and a smaller amount of critical hit rate. So we're going to put that in. Okay, So now at this point in time, if we save and we have a look, we'll see that our critical hit rate is 36.465%, right? And at a 0.2 times multiplier. Now, this is the first thing, quick little PSA here. The first thing that people always look at when they finish this build and they go, bro, how's your critical hit rate like in the 100%, but mine is only 36, 38, something like that. That is because her passive ability, which feeds off of your MP, your max MP, right? In this page here, you can see that it gives you skill critical hit rate increase based on your max MP times 6.5%. This buff does not work in Albion. Watch what happens when I travel. Once you get into the lab or outside Albion, we go up exactly the same mods and everything, max skill critical hit rate of 100%, 4.2 times multiply, and you can see here exactly the same mods. So don't worry, nothing's broken. The shit just doesn't work in the city. Just go outside or do a dungeon or do a void erosion purge. Your crit's gonna be what it needs to be. Okay, so crit and everything is figured out right now. The next thing that we need to do is we need to focus on cooldowns. Okay, again, like I said, we want our cooldowns to be as low as possible. So we want nimble fingers for sure. Nimble fingers is a cooldown mod. And you'll notice that now we are starting to approach some really juicy cooldowns. Instead of a 5-second cooldown on our 1, it's a 3.7 seconds. And instead of a 30-second cooldown on our 4, it's a 22.3 seconds. Good. But we're still not quite there yet. We can also put in the focus mods. The focus mods give us more damage, but what they also do is they give us cooldowns. So we have 2 that we can use. We can use one called Focus on Tech. This gives us Tech Skill Power Modifier, which is the skill type that we use, and a skill cooldown of negative 6.1%. And we can also do Focus on Electric. This gives us electrical skill power of 77.2% and also another skill cooldown here. So now we are starting to approach some really good cooldowns here, but we can drop a massive amount of additional cooldown in for us by using something called MP conversion. And what MP conversion is going to do is it's going to reduce our skill cooldown by another 36.5%, which is how we get to basically 1.3 second cooldown on our 1 and a 7.7 second cooldown on our 4. But it does also take some of our max MP away. So that means that now we aren't going to be at 100% crit anymore. We're at 95.6. Now, everything in the game has crit resistances. And if you are trying to do some of the harder void intercept bosses, then of course you want to get as close to, if not 100 as you can, so that you can ensure that you crit a lot. However, basically 96% crit is good enough for void erosion activity, at least in my opinion. If you disagree, then find another mod to use. Go right ahead. So this is then basically what we have. Now we have one other mod which we need to drop in, and that is a mod that actually works for our range. This is skill expansion. Now, skill expansion, as I mentioned, increases the bounces, and so now we have more bounces of our 1 ability, and we have a bigger circumference of our snare hunter ability. This is the basis of 99% of the builds out there that you will find for Ines. And I, as I mentioned, can say that there's a general consensus among fucking builders for this game that this is the sort of like bare setup for Ines. The 10th mod is where it starts getting interesting, and I'm going to explain to you why. Before we dive into that, for this example, I'm going to use tier 19 as an example. Basically, I did all of this testing on tier 19 because tier 19 is the most efficient way to farm weapon cores at the moment, according to another video that I made in my findings. And also at the same time, it allowed me to essentially also cover some of the nuance of the things that you can do to survive with her in these void erosion purge activities. Now, before some dude from the comments jumps here and says, yeah, bro, tier 19 is easy fucking shit. What about tier 20? Here, while I was recording the footage, is a screenshot of me doing a tier 20 with the same setup that I'm showing you currently at 3 minutes and 24 seconds. So it's the same shit. It's exactly the same thing. The stuff that you do on tier 19 is the same as the stuff that you do on tier 20. So the point still stands. So a lot of creators will tell you that Decimator is a really good mod to put in here. Decimator, what it does is it gives you skill power modifier plus 5%. When you defeat enemies, this can stack 10 times, so you can get 50% additional skill power modifier, which is a pretty big chunk of skill power modifier for, and of course, more of this means that your abilities are hitting harder, and if they're hitting harder, they're killing enemies faster, and if enemies die faster, you do the activity quicker, and also, you know, they're dead, so they can't do anything to you. And Decimator is really good. My best time with using Decimator in tier 19 is 2 minutes and 57 seconds, as you can see on the screen here. And I did this in most cases between 5 and 10 times for each one of these mods to kind of like set a median. But this was my best time with Decimator, and anything below 3 minutes is good, guys. Let me tell you, that is a really, really good and respectable time. Again, for the most part, people aren't necessarily trying to speed run this shit. Only few players are doing that, so as long as you get in with more than enough time left to pass on to the next activity, then you're good to go. But of course, bear in mind that the faster that you do this, the more weapon cores per hour you can farm, which means the more chances you have to upgrade your weapons, which is why we try to make it as efficient as possible. So those are my results with Decimator, and I think Decimator is a perfectly fine choice for a 10th mod. Then there are a lot of creators who say that Potent Collector is fucking fantastic. Potent Collector is a good mod for Ines because what it does is when you defeat an enemy, you get 12.2% of your custom resource back at a 17% chance. So basically almost a 1 out of 5 chance for every enemy that you kill, you get more of your plasma back. And plasma is important because Snare Hunter, your 4th ability, does not cost MP, it costs plasma. So if you don't get in enough plasma, then you don't get the skill enough. And if you don't get the skill enough, it really, really hampers your ability to push fast and also to deal with large groups of enemies in a, let's say, easy way. So Potent Collector performs really well, and in doing this activity, my best time in tier 19 with Potent Collector was 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Not massively different to what we saw with Decimator, but yes, still an improvement. And basically this allows you to use your 4th ability almost all the time, but you basically then also kind of like sacrifice a little bit of just damage with your 1 and everything like that because you're not getting the increase with Decimator. Next, some creators will tell you that Dangerous Ambush is a good idea as well. Now, Dangerous Ambush is absolutely thought of as the mod that is used for fighting Void Intercept bosses, because when you stun them, you basically, you know, push them into a state where you get this immobilized increase to your skill power of 49.8%, which is huge. When it comes to mobbing, especially if you're playing solo, then oftentimes you are the focus of the enemies and they are constantly trying to target you, which eliminates a lot of the bonus that you get from this mod. However, because of Ines moving from room to room or moving from area to area and oftentimes killing enemies as soon as they spawn without them being able to target you or maybe not even see you and not even being in the same room as you, it means that you do oftentimes benefit from Dangerous Ambush, and it actually pushes out a lot of damage. So this is an absolute viable choice. Don't let anybody tell you any different. And using this, my best time that I could get was again 2 minutes and 57 seconds. Exactly the same as Decimator. So in the case of this, what this basically means to us is that this performs almost equally to Decimator. Again, you have to obviously assume that there's some kind of nuance here, and it also matters, you know, to the player and everything like that. But from a bonus perspective, I don't necessarily see the difference between the two. I would say, with this one caveat, that I think Dangerous Ambush is probably better for the inside Void Erosion Purge missions, and I would say Decimator is probably better for the outside when you have big open areas and everything like that. I hope I said that right. I might have said Decimator twice. So Decimator for outside, Dangerous Ambush for fucking inside. I think that pretty much covers it. All right, then I know that there are some people who actually struggle with survivability. They feel like one survivability fucking thing is too little, you know, too little survivability for us. And it's possible that stages 21 to 30 are going to be so fucking brutal that we need to sacrifice some damage so that we can actually stay in the fight and not get dropped the whole time. Because every time you die in Void Erosion Purge, you essentially get, you know, a penalty in time. And of course, if you don't finish it in time, you're going to progress to the next area. So you will fail. So in that case, my suggestion to you is to use something called HP Collector. Now, HP Collector, what it does is it Every time when you defeat an enemy, you instantly get 9% of your max HP back, and this is on a 2-second cooldown. So every 2 seconds you can get almost 10% of your HP back, which is really, really good and really helps you with survivability. The bonus side to this as well is that you can also, once you are better at playing with Ines, you can almost play a lot more aggressive because you have a way to constantly feed HP back onto you. So you don't have to be as skittish and avoiding the enemy. You can kind of like just fucking really go in hard and go fucking balls to the wall, and you'll deal a bunch of damage while healing yourself. Now, in using HP Collector, I was able to get a clear time. My best one was 2 minutes and 49 seconds of a tier 19. So it absolutely works. And again, it requires you to slightly augment your playstyle because you can be a little bit more gutsy now. And by doing that, yes, you are dealing less damage, but you're moving faster. So you're getting the better time. And overall, this is a really, really good benefit. Now for the last one, all right, I want to mention something that I run. So my preferred method, and you won't believe this, but it is actually the setup that I use for bossing. So you'll notice here, you'll notice this is my build for Defiler. It's what I use to do void intercept bosses with. And you'll notice that this is exactly the same thing. And what maximize range does is it gets you to the maximum size of your snare hunter. So now the circumference of this turret kill zone is fucking huge. And it gives you the maximum amount of floating lightning bounces. This is the setup that I actually generally run. I don't get any increases to my damage. I don't give myself more survivability. This just allows me to get the maximum amount of bounces on my 1, which deals a lot of damage, and really, really big kill zones with my 4. And in testing with this, my quickest time that I could do was 2 minutes and 47 seconds, which is really, really respectable, and actually beating out Decimator, Dangerous Ambush, and HP Collector, only being beat by 1 second by Potent Collector. So now you guys might be thinking, okay, cool, Measure. What's the fucking point of all of this? What are you trying to say? What I'm trying to say is I don't think it necessarily matters whichever one of these 5 mods or any other fucking mod you pick for that matter. I don't think people should be worrying too much about this because personally for me, it comes down to 2 things. One, you have to consider that Ines is such a fucking bully powerhouse from a damage perspective that it matters more how you play her, and it's absolutely a skill issue. Ines is the Descendant that I've got maybe 40-ish hours on now, and more than maybe 200 Void Erosion Purge runs. And experience and knowing how to push her kit and when to go and everything goes a lot further than your decision on this final mod. I think the decision on this final mod should be based on those criteria that I gave to you just now. If you're worried about survivability, go HP Collector. If you want to use your 4th ability on cooldown the whole time and not worry about when you should be using it, Potent Collector. If you want to give yourself a little bit more damage, Decimator. If you want to kill stuff that's, fucking, in other rooms that don't know you're there yet, Dangerous Ambush. Decimator for outside, Dangerous Ambush for inside. And last but not least, if you want to essentially have a kit feel the best and basically give you the maximum amount of bounces and maximum kill zone with your 4th ability, use range. All of these work almost equally well, and I think you'll only really notice the difference at the top echelon of speedrunning, where one of these mods might potentially shave off a second, 2 or 3 off of the maximum finish time. This will be important for some players because leaderboards are also coming with this patch, and if you are looking to feature on those leaderboards, your decision on this 10th mod might make or break the build. But for the rest of us, the rest of the people that just want to get weapon cores as fast as possible, pick the mod that you are comfortable with. Next, let's talk weapons, reactor, and external components. When it comes from weapons, absolutely Secret Garden is your best choice, and that's because Secret Garden is a stat stick for Ines. Secret Garden's special ability or unique ability basically gives you, when you use tech skills, a buff that triggers and gives you stacks of additional skill power, and that is a fantastic reason to essentially carry this weapon. You never have to shoot it, you could just use this as a stat stick. However, I would advise you to develop your Secret Garden for 2 reasons. One, oftentimes you have enemies that have a weird kind of like shield on their head. You can see this in a tier 20 Void Erosion Purge. That boss, that shield has to be shot off their head. You cannot damage it with skills, and so therefore you need to blast that with a weapon that can take it down fast before the boss actually kills you. So in that case, it is a good idea to build out your secret garden, and this is the secret garden build that I use. I have a build video exactly for this, explaining all of the mods on the channel. Just look for my most recent secret garden build if you want to see that. Secondly, your weapon cores on the secret garden can also make you go a lot faster, and that's because you can stack sprint speed onto the secret garden as well as grappling hook charge time. Both of these allow you to move faster through areas, and these can shave off precious seconds in this activity, so I absolutely also advise you to augment that. Then when we talk reactors, we should absolutely be using Tingling Mechanics, which is an electric tech reactor. The choice of substats absolutely matter as well. Range can help out here if you don't want to use maximum range. Cooldown can be massive here, getting you close to a 1 second on your first ability, which is great. But additional damage is also good for us here. Electric and tech power boost ratio gives us more bang for our buck with our abilities. Spell or skill critical damage is also good. And if you really want to get to that 100%, then skill critical hit on here is also good. Pretty much all of those are workable and can make you actually, achieve success in this activity. Of course, the only thing you don't want is damage to Colossus, which I think is obvious. Then in terms of our external components, a 4 out of 4 Slayer set is what you want. By the way, a 5 out of 5 reactor is not necessary, but absolutely fucking helps a lot. All right, this will shave off a huge amount of time from your runs. You'll notice this because you'll be hitting a lot harder. So prioritize this. Find the reactor that you want to upgrade and get it to a 5 out of 5, and you will not look back. External components, 4 out of 4 Slayer is good for us here because of that additional skill power plus 26.1%. Substats, survivability substats, yeah, for sure. But I want to call out 3 specific substats which you absolutely want. You want MP recovery out of combat. This is really good and really helps you to not have to necessarily hunt down blue orbs when you are moving from room to room or from area to area in Void Erosion Purge. So this will absolutely increase your MP recovery a lot. And then on your sensor, you want max MP and you want MP recovery in combat. Without this max MP roll here, your skill critical hit rate will suffer a lot. So get as close to a gold as possible. You can see I have a purple. If I had a gold here, I would be on a 100% skill critical hit rate, most likely, or just under it. MP recovery in combat is the counterpart to MP recovery out of combat. So this ensures that even while you are in the fight and fighting enemies in rooms and shit like that, or wherever, that you are actually still recovering MP as well. And this is important because your first ability and your second one, if you want to use it, both use MP. So you want to have as much of that as possible. So that's the only ones. The rest of the stats on here are good. MP recovery modifier is also really good, but it's more like a have more kind of situation. I think as long as you have out of combat recovery and in combat recovery and max MP, you're good to go. But MP recovery modifier just increases those other ones as well still. So that's just more cherry on the fucking cake. The rest of the shit is just survivability. Max shield is good, defense is good, toxin resistance is good for a little bit of help against the toxin, and of course max HP if you can get it. Slayer is a glass cannon set, let's be honest, so the point is you're not going to pick up great defensible options on here, but that's the point though, because this is about pushing out raw damage more than anything else. For the next part of the video, I'm actually going to do a Void Erosion Purge. Guess what? Void Erosion Purge stage 19 with you guys, and I'm just going to run through some of the decision making and everything like that. I appreciate you for still sticking through this. I know this is a much longer video than I usually make, but this is really good information, I believe, and will help a lot of people hit the ground running with this activity, whether you're starting from 1 or 21. Let's go. So we're going to be running 19, as I said, and this is the maximum range one. So for my 10th mod, I'm using maximum range. So no HP collector, no decimator, no potent collector, and obviously no dangerous ambush. I'm also going to do it without doing any weapon switching or anything. So no using Vaultia or anything like that. I'm just going to use the brute power of her skills. I'm not going to fire a single fucking bullet unless it's accidental, and basically that will show you how you can get through this. At the beginning here, what I'm doing is I'm just using my second ability to charge up so that I get a little bit of additional damage from my inversion, which we'll talk about after this run. You can see I'm just using cover here. At the beginning, when you have no plasma, you're basically at your most vulnerable, and you're kind of like just want to stay out of, you know, getting into too much trouble, so you can build up your 4th skill and you have some plasma and you can go. Once you got plasma, you're good to go. And now you're basically just using one of your 4 abilities on each group. Never 2, only 1, because if you use 2, you cannot get the benefit of the plasma return from 2 casts. You can only get it from 1, so using more than 1 is inefficient. So you just want to go boom, and pretty much you can see I'm using this on every 2nd group. Once you have a good rotation going, and once you're just moving super fast, you can start doing cute shit like this, and you can just kind of like go through the enemies. You can see I'm folding in my 2nd ability whenever I've done a couple of the 1st, and then whenever we get a big group, we just put a fucking snare hunter on top of them, and we keep going. These smaller groups, and again, after you do these stages, I've done this stage many times, as I'm sure you can tell, you'll start to notice when you should spam your abilities and everything like that. That will, of course, also, you know, save you time and things like that. But pretty much, as you can see, we essentially just use the cover and everything as we move from room to room. In situations where you're out in the open like this, it's very important to not be trapped like that there. That was a very bad mistake that I made there, but we were able to, you know, make it work for us. But you just want to kind of like use the sides and everything, and just not get into any situation where you will get blasted by an arm cannon. Every once in a while, you are going to get some health pop-ups, and that'll get you back to a more comfortable position. And in the time that you're waiting for those health drops, you just play a little bit more conservative. So yeah, just moving from room to room, we clean it out. And in big groups like this, like I said, it's not being a pussy, it's just playing smart. You just use the edges, and you just make sure that the enemy doesn't just completely, you know, put you down. Because a lot of these enemies can basically kill you by just hitting you once. Or at the very least, you know, 2-tapping you. So you want to be careful. A death is catastrophic in a time sense, because not only does it cost you time, but it also unfortunately takes all your plasma away. So if you've been spending time building up plasma, like I've been doing, so that I always have a 4th ability available, that plasma is now all gone, and you kind of like have to start doing it again from fucking scratch, which is annoying. I think is maybe the right way to put it. This is our boss right here. He can absolutely 1-tap you if he does his jumping attack on you. That shit, if that hits you, it's fucking bye-bye. And now he's gonna spawn in a bunch of ads, which we can pretty much almost kill completely by just using 1 snare hunter. And we can do 1 final snare hunter on him. This should be enough for us to seal the deal. This is probably gonna be a below 3-minute run. At least I'm hoping so. Just for the sake of this. Oh, well, we're just over 3 minutes at 3 minutes and 4 seconds. So I think if I dial it in and just concentrate a little bit more, then this will actually be a little bit more successful. But nonetheless, I think I illustrated my point. And again, like I said, that is, of course, with the range mod and essentially that making it work. Now, I do also want to finish this out by just quickly talking about inversion reinforcements, which is, of course, the seasonal mechanic that you have to level up. This is another thing that gives us a fair amount of, you know, benefit if we use it correctly. More specifically, arc boost is good for us, because when we hit 5 or more enemies, which we can absolutely do almost all the time with our abilities, especially Snare Hunter, we get skill cooldown and range increase modifier, which is dope, which basically just caps us on range. And we also have Quantum Domain, which gives us skill effect range again, as well as skill power up to 15 stacks. And at the beginning, when I was hitting my 2 ability to build up those stacks, these are the stacks that I was building up. So once you get up to 15 stacks, these 15 stacks stay with you the duration of the run, or as long as you don't die. And obviously this gives you a fair amount of additional damage and range as well. Also, again, just capping us out. Then from a survivability perspective, you can use something like your heightened sensory cells, and that of course giving you hyperdimensional vision. This just removes debuffs and stuff like that, but this gives you a fair bit of, like, you know, kind of like emergency help as well. And then further on, Hunt also here. Really, I think the 2 choices is between Inversion Particle Augmentation, which gives us defense stacks when we kill enemies, or you can use Biodensity Augmentation, which gives us HP stacks when we kill enemies. Nonetheless, then I don't know why it loaded me out now. Okay, I think we hit the timer, but then the last one there at the top, but we'll just quickly go back to that once my Easy Bake Oven loads us into the capital. So the last one there, then basically as long as you have some of these stacks on you, then it activates enhanced pain suppression, which also gives us incoming damage modifier of -4.1. We are playing glass cannon, not gas cannon. That's a different build. We're playing glass cannon, so every little bit of survivability that we can get additional helps us a lot. So this is the reason why we pick some of these things. But damage comes from here, survivability comes from there. Good choices all around, and that's pretty much it. That's gonna be it for the build, guys. Like I said, super long video, about double the length of my usuals, but nonetheless, hopefully a decent amount of information for you and things that can help you get ready for Void Erosion Purge, whether you're starting from the beginning or whether you're going from 21 to 30. Let me know in the comments down below if you will be piloting Ines or if you're gonna try it with another Descendant. And as always, fucking cheers.